Today in class, we learned some fraction decimal equivalents. We wrote them down in families, and you need to memorize them. Remember, we're going to have a quiz on Wednesday. And if you make 100 on the quiz, that gives you the right to use your fraction decimal equivalent family sheet on all tests and quizzes for the rest of the year. It's very helpful. So work on that. Now, there are 3 ways to go back and forth from fractions to decimals, decimals to fraction. The first way that we're going to talk about is the sheet I gave you. Just memorize the fraction decimal equivalents. Okay? Now, sometimes there is a shortcut. Sometimes there's a shortcut, which is very nice. So we're going to talk about the shortcuts. And then sometimes you just have to do it the logical way, okay? The normal way. When you're going from decimals and you're changing a decimal to a fraction, it's pretty logical. When you're changing a fraction to a decimal, you usually have to divide. So we're going to say logic or divide. 3 ways. Now, I like to memorize the sheet, because then I can just go, 1/8 this point 125. I know that one. And then if there's one that's not on the sheet, I'm looking for a shortcut. This is the last part. The logic thing is not so hard, but dividing is not always the funnest thing. So let me show you how this works. Okay, we're going to start by changing fractions to decimals. Fractions to decimals. Let's start with this one. 21/8. The very first thing to do is, if it's improper, go ahead and make it a mixed number. So that is 2. 2 times 8 is 16. That leaves 5 and 5/8. Then I'm starting to get excited because I recognize 5/8. It's one of the ones from my family page I got in class today. So 2 and 5/8, well, obviously the whole number 2 stays a whole number. That makes sense. And 5/8, when you look on the sheet, is 0.625. So I just used my sheet first. That's what I'm always going to try to use first, or my memory when I get them memorized. Now, if I didn't have my sheet and I didn't have them memorized, I would have to take 5, put it inside the box, top number always goes in the box, and divide by 8. When I did that, I would get 0.625. See, because 6 times 8 is 48. 8 goes 2 times into 20. That's 16. And you have 40, and 8 goes 5 times into 40. So you could have divided the fraction part. I don't need to do anything with this part because it's just a whole number. It's just hanging out waiting for the fraction to change to a decimal. So 21/8. First you make it proper, and then you say, that's 2.625 because I know the equivalent, or you divide to get it. Either way works, but memorizing is wonderful. Here's our next one, going from fractions to decimals. Okay, this one is on my sheet, and I just have to remember how it works, because I need to remember there's a shortcut for the 7s family. Remember, they're awful repeaters. And I need to remember 14, 28, 57. And then I'm going to go, that's the smallest number. That's the next smallest number. That's the 3rd smallest number. That's the 4th smallest number. That's the 5th smallest number. That's the 6th smallest number. And I'm going to look over here and go 4, okay? 4, right here is the 4. No, the 4 is down here, the 4th smallest number. So I'm at 4 here. So I'm going to start with 5, 7, and wrap back around to 1, 4, 2, 8. They're horrid repeaters, and that's the answer. Now, if I didn't memorize my sheet, or I didn't learn the hint and try to remember 14, 28, 57, then I've got to divide that. So what goes in the box? 4. 7 goes on the outside. That's not going to be fun to divide. I'm not going to take time to divide it right now, but when you divide it, you get this answer. In my mind, I would rather learn the shortcut way, the sheet way, than have to divide that every time. Because all the 7s, they're horrid repeaters. Okay, let's do another one. What about 11 sixths? Well, first make it proper. So that's 1 and 5 sixths. Now, if you had your sheet, or if you memorized your sheet, you would know that 5 sixths is 0.83 repeating. So you just put 1, the whole number doesn't change, 0.83 with the repeater over the 3. If you didn't know what it was, you would have to put 5 in the box, divide by 6, add a decimal and some zeros, and find out it's 0.83 repeating. Here's your first part of video homework. Now, there are some fractions that when you change them to a decimal, there's a beautiful shortcut. Okay? These are the fractions when they have a 20 in the denominator, a 25 in the denominator, a 10, or a 100. Let's start with 9/10. Well, 9/10 means put 9 in the tenths place. So that's 0.9. That's pretty easy. 9/10 is 0.9. And 7/100 means put 7 in the 100ths place. Well, the 100ths place is over here, so you have to put a 0 in the tenths place. That's 7/100. Now, 7/20 works because I can change it to an equivalent fraction with 100 on the bottom, because 20 times 5 is 100. So 7 times 5 is 35. Well, that's just 0.35. That is 35/100. Do you see a shortcut for the 8/25? Could I get that to 100? Well, sure. 25 times 4, think quarters, is 100. And 8 times 4 is 32. So that would be 0.32. So sometimes there's a shortcut. Now, let's change decimals to fractions. Okay? Decimals to fractions. Look at this decimal. 0.008. That's tens, that's hundreds, that's thousandths. So doesn't this read 8/1000ths? Of course it does. So it's 8/1000ths. Another way I can tell is 3 decimal places, 3 zeros. Now, once I get 8/1000ths, I have to reduce it, because we always write fractions in simplest forms. Well, that happens to be 4 if I divide by 2 over 500. If I divide by 2 again, I get 2 over 250. 250 won't divide by 2. Well, yes it will. So that will be 1 over 125. And that's my final answer. Okay? What about the decimal 0.6 negative? Negative 0.6. If it's negative as a decimal, it's negative as a fraction. We're just changing forms. If it's negative as a fraction, it's negative as a decimal. So that doesn't change. So your answer will be negative, of course. Now, 0.6 is in the tenths spot. So that's 6/10. And we said it's still negative. Does 6/10 reduce? Yes. It reduces to negative 3/5. So negative 3/5 is the answer. Okay, when you have a decimal number that has a whole number involved, you just leave the whole number. That's still the whole number 3, isn't it? And you change the decimal part to a fraction. So that's 75 over 100, because that's hundredths right there. Now you have to reduce this. Think quarters. That reduces to 3 3/4. Always reduce and simplify your fractions. Here's the next part of video homework. Now, sometimes the book in this section wants us to give 2 equivalent numbers, and it doesn't say write them as fractions or decimals, so we could do both. So if it gives you 8 3/4 and says give 2 equivalent numbers, well, what's that as a decimal? Well, it's 8.75. Can I write it like a fraction with the 75? Sure, so that's 8.75 100ths. Both of those are equivalent to this. So when it says give 2 equivalent numbers, you want to maybe look at the fraction and the decimal form. Now, here's another one, 0.66. Give 2 equivalent numbers. Well, that's 66 over 100. And if I reduce it, that's 33 over 50. So I just gave 2 equivalents. They're both equal to this. Make sense? Here's your last part of video homework. Take this number and give 2 equivalent numbers. Have a great evening.